40 years before the Titanic vanished beneath the Atlantic, another White Star liner was racing through the darkness, carrying nearly 1,000 people toward a disaster history almost forgot. She was built by Harland and Wolff, sailed for the White Star Line, and promised the same dream Titanic would later symbolize: speed, power, luxury, and absolute confidence in modern engineering. But on April 1st, 1873, that confidence met the same enemy that would one day claim Titanic: ice-cold water, human error, and a sea that gives no second chances. Before Titanic became the name the world would never forget, Atlantic revealed a truth the steamship age did not want to face. Even the proudest ships were fragile when confidence outran caution. Her name was SS Atlantic, and if Titanic became White Star's most famous tragedy, Atlantic was its first great warning. To understand what happened that night, you have to imagine the world before radio distress calls, before radar, before satellite navigation, a world where a captain's judgment, a chart, a compass, and the weather could mean the difference between safe harbour and catastrophe. The late 1800s were an age of ambition. Steamships became the new giants of the Atlantic, and companies fought to dominate the crossing. Decades before Titanic, the White Star Line wanted to rule the ocean. Their answer was the Oceanic class, and the second ship in that proud lineup was the SS Atlantic. Built in 1870 by Harland and Wolff in Belfast, Atlantic came from the shipyard partnership that would help define White Star's identity. Long before Titanic rose from those yards, Harland and Wolff were already helping White Star reinvent itself for the steam age. As yard number 74, Atlantic helped begin a relationship between White Star and Harland and Wolff that would shape some of the most famous ships ever launched. To passengers crowding the docks at Liverpool, she must have looked less like a vessel and more like a promise. Steam for regularity, sails for backup, iron for strength, and a future that seemed powerful enough to conquer the Atlantic. She stretched 420 feet from bow to stern. She was built of iron, powered by a 600-horsepower engine and crowned with 4 towering masts. At full speed, she could make 14.5 knots, fast enough to feel like the future had arrived. She was powerful, elegant, modern. But beneath all that innovation was a flaw, a quiet, creeping problem that no one fully understood. Her coal consumption was unpredictable. And in the age before accurate gauges, running out of coal in the middle of the Atlantic wasn't an inconvenience. It was a death sentence. On March 20th, 1873, the Atlantic left Liverpool carrying 952 souls, families seeking new lives, crewmen hardened by the sea, and even 14 stowaways hiding in the shadows. Some passengers were bound for opportunity. Others were leaving hardship behind. In steerage, families carried what little they owned in trunks, bundles, and pockets. Above them, first-class passengers moved through more comfortable spaces, unaware that before the voyage was over, class would mean almost nothing against water, darkness, and cold. From the moment she left port, the ocean seemed restless. Storms battered the ship. Winds howled against the rigging. Waves slammed the hull with a force that felt almost deliberate. By March 31st, the engineers delivered a chilling warning. The coal was running out. The warning did not arrive like a single dramatic moment. It crept in through calculations, through shovelfuls burned faster than expected, through anxious looks exchanged below deck. The engines still turned. The ship still pushed forward. But every mile now carried a question. Would there be enough? Captain James Williams faced a terrible choice: press on toward New York and risk drifting helplessly, or divert to Halifax, the nearest port. He chose Halifax. On paper, the decision made sense. Halifax was closer than New York. It offered coal, shelter, and a chance to continue safely. But the shortest path to safety can become the road to disaster when weather, currents, and human confidence all turn against you. But there was something he didn't know. He had never sailed those waters before. He had no detailed charts, no harbour pilot guiding him in, and no real understanding of the reefs and currents that made the coastline so dangerous. The Atlantic was heading toward land, but no one on board realized just how close they already were. There were no electronic warnings, no voice from shore, and no beacon cutting through the storm. Just dead reckoning, uncertain estimates, and a coastline that refused to reveal itself until the final moments. Night fell like a curtain. Below deck, many passengers slept. Others may have lain awake, listening to the ship groan as it climbed and fell with the waves. To them, the storm was frightening, but not unusual. Ocean crossings were harsh. Ships rolled. Iron complained. The sea always sounded angry at night. The storm intensified. The sky vanished. The sea became a black void. The crew believed they were miles offshore, safely navigating toward Halifax. But the ocean had other plans. A powerful current, one the captain didn't even know existed, dragged the ship north toward a jagged coastline near Lower Prospect. At 3:15 a.m., the lookouts saw something strange ahead. Not land, not lights, but white water, waves breaking over unseen rocks. That white water was the ocean's final warning. Rocks, shallow water, and a ship already inside the jaws of the coast. They shouted a warning that came too late. The SS Atlantic struck a submerged reef with a roar that echoed through the hull. Iron plates buckled. Water surged in. The ship shuddered violently as if the ocean itself had grabbed hold of her. For a moment there may have been disbelief. A ship so large, so modern, was not supposed to end like this. Torn open in the dark, so close to land that salvation could be seen only after it was too late. Passengers were thrown from their bunks. Lanterns shattered. Darkness swallowed the lower decks. The Atlantic began to roll onto her side. Lifeboats were crushed by waves before they could be lowered. The storm howled like a living thing. And deep inside the ship, water rushed through corridors that moments earlier had been filled with sleeping families. Some survivors climbed toward air. Others forced themselves through broken passages as the ship leaned farther over. Atlantic had become a maze, and the maze was filling with the sea. The next minutes were chaos. Hundreds of passengers, many of them immigrants, were trapped below deck. The ship tilted so sharply that hallways became walls, staircases became cliffs, and water surged through the compartments with terrifying speed. The crew tried to maintain order, but the storm drowned out their voices. And then came the most haunting truth of the entire disaster. Every woman on board died. Not one survived the night. Of the children, only one lived. The rest were lost to the sea, swept away, trapped below, or pulled under by the freezing Atlantic. That is why the disaster remains so haunting. The sea took first those with the least chance to reach open air. By dawn, between 535 and 560 people were dead. The exact number has been debated for generations, but every estimate points to the same conclusion. The loss was staggering. But the ocean had not claimed everyone. Far away on the rocky shore, a few villagers noticed something strange in the storm. A shape in the water, a broken mast, and the faint, desperate cries of survivors. As the first light crept over the horizon, the fishermen of Lower Prospect realized what had happened. A massive ship, shattered, half submerged, lay just offshore. Survivors clung to the rigging, perched on the hull, or huddled on the rocks. The storm was still raging. The surf slammed against the rocks. Any boat launched into that water could be smashed apart in seconds. But the villagers didn't hesitate. They launched their small boats into the chaos. These weren't trained rescue crews with equipment and commands. They were local fishermen, men who knew the reefs, the currents, and the brutal moods of that coast. They were fathers, sons, and brothers, risking everything to reach strangers before the sea took them. From shore, the scene must have looked impossible. A giant iron ship broken in the surf, figures clinging to rigging like shadows, and voices carrying over the water. The fishermen pushed out anyway, timing their movements between waves and steering through rocks that could tear open a hull as easily as they had torn open Atlantic. They formed human chains across the rocks. They threw lines to men too weak to swim. They dragged survivors from the freezing surf, hauled them into boats, and carried them toward houses where dry clothes, heat, and shelter meant another chance at life. One fisherman, John Maher, became a symbol of that courage. He made trip after trip into the deadly waves, returning again and again, even when exhaustion and cold could have ended him too. By the time the rescue effort ended, the people of Lower Prospect had helped save over 400 lives, not through grand machinery or official command, but through nerve, local knowledge, and the refusal to let strangers die within sight of shore. In the freezing water, minutes mattered. A hand on a rope, a boat pushed through surf, a stranger pulled from a wave. Each small act became the thin line between life and death. In the aftermath, survivors described the villagers as angels in oilskins, appearing out of the storm when all hope seemed lost. In the days that followed, the coastline became a place of grief. Wreckage washed ashore, belongings appeared among the rocks, and the dead were gathered and buried nearby in St. Paul's Anglican Cemetery and Star of the Sea Roman Catholic Cemetery. The White Star Line erected memorials. Investigators arrived, and slowly the truth emerged. Investigators found no single villain behind the disaster, only a chain of ordinary failures that became deadly together. The captain had misjudged Atlantic's position. The crew had underestimated the coal problem. Local currents were poorly understood, and the ship approached land at full speed, in darkness, without the charts she desperately needed. The tragedy forced changes. New charts were created. Navigation practices improved. Safety procedures tightened. Atlantic became a warning written in iron and salt water. Decades before Titanic, she had already shown how quickly confidence could sink. That is what makes the Harland and Wolff connection so haunting. Atlantic came from one of the most ambitious builders in the world, yet fine engineering could not overcome bad judgment, poor information, and the unforgiving edge of a coastline in the dark. Today, Atlantic rests in 40 to 60 feet of cold, murky water near Peggy's Cove. Her bow lies apart from the hull, iron plates are scattered across the seabed, and artifacts still rest in the sand. Onshore, the SS Atlantic Heritage Park preserves what remains of the story, artifacts, memorials, and a quiet boardwalk facing the same water that once hid the disaster. Most people have never heard of the SS Atlantic, but the ocean has not forgotten. And neither have the rocks that tore her open. She was more than a forgotten shipwreck. She was a story of ambition, misjudgment, terror, and unexpected heroism. Her legacy reminds us that history is not only shaped by the disasters everyone remembers. Sometimes it lives in the tragedies that fade, in names carved into weathered stones, and in wreckage resting beneath cold water. The SS Atlantic did not vanish from history. She sank into the part of it we too easily forget.